Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now, In the Pastor's Care. This story contains descriptions of violence. Franklin, Wyatt, had a voice that made people lean in, a voice you'd trust to guide you through a storm. In the sleepy town of Crosshaven, sometime in the mid-1980s, Franklin was more than a pastor. He was a caretaker for the foster kids no one else could handle, and a fixture at every town potluck. People saw Franklin as a quiet man with an unshakable sense of purpose. No one would have guessed he was running from a past darker than any storm cloud. Years ago, Franklin had done the unthinkable. He'd taken the lives of his wife, Elise, and his teenage daughter, Margaret. They weren't cruel women, but they were fierce. Too fierce for Franklin's tightly wound idea of what a household should be. Elise never backed down from an argument, and Margaret's quick wit was as sharp as a knife. To Franklin, their defiance wasn't just a challenge. It was a sign of something broken that needed fixing. One thunderous night, in the heat of a feverish prayer, he believed he'd heard God's voice telling him how to save them. And so he acted, not out of rage, but a misguided conviction that he was doing right by them. Afterward, Franklin vanished. Back then, it was easier to slip through the cracks. No internet to trace your steps, no databases to cross-check your lies. Franklin reinvented himself as a pastor in Crosshaven. His calm demeanor and willingness to take in troubled teens earned him a reputation as a saint. He never let on that his saintly acts were fueled by guilt so heavy it made his hands shake when he prayed alone at night. On a brisk October morning, Naomi arrived at Franklin's foster home. She was 17, with wild brown hair barely contained in a bun, and eyes that dared you to challenge her. The social worker's file described her as intelligent but confrontational. A girl who'd burned through too many foster homes. Franklin greeted Naomi with his usual warmth, extending a hand. "Welcome home, Naomi," he said. Naomi paused, her gaze sharp before muttering, "Thanks," and brushing past him into the house. Naomi wasn't one to fade into the background. She questioned Franklin's rules, skipped prayer meetings, and made no effort to hide her disdain for his sermons. The other teens adored her Her wit was magnetic, and her boldness gave them something to admire. But to Franklin, she was a storm waiting to happen. Her defiance brought back memories of Elise and Margaret. He saw the same fire in Naomi, and it kept him awake at night. One evening, Naomi came home late. Franklin was waiting in the kitchen, his Bible open on the table, and a single lamp casting long, flickering shadows. "We have rules here, Naomi," he said, his voice calm but heavy. Naomi dropped her backpack onto a chair and crossed her arms. "What are you gonna do? Kick me out?" "Go ahead. It's not like I haven't heard it before." Franklin closed his Bible and stood, gripping the back of the chair in front of him. "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to help you." Naomi rolled her eyes so hard, it was a wonder they didn't stick. "Save the speech, Pastor. You're not my dad, and you're definitely not my savior." With that, she turned and headed upstairs, leaving Franklin staring after her. That night, Franklin retreated to the basement, where he kept his tools and spent hours in prayer. The space smelled of sawdust and damp earth. As he knelt on the cold floor, his thoughts swirled. Naomi wasn't just another rebellious teen. She was a test, a reflection of everything he'd failed to fix before. If he couldn't save her, what did that say about him? About the choices he'd made? The next day, Franklin asked Naomi to join him in the basement after dinner. His house was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. "I'd like to pray with you," he said, his tone steady but insistent. Naomi raised an eyebrow, her arms crossed. "What's this about?" "Finding peace," Franklin replied. He watched as she hesitated, then shrugged and followed him downstairs. The basement was lit by a single bulb that cast harsh light over the cluttered space. Franklin gestured toward a wooden bench. Naomi sat, but kept her arms folded, her eyes scanning the room. "All right," Naomi said, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "Let's hear it." Franklin stood before her, gripping his Bible. "This isn't just about prayer," Franklin began, his voice trembling. "It's about saving your soul." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Yeah, no, I'm out." She stood to leave, but Franklin blocked her path. "Sit down," he said, his voice low and urgent. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Naomi snapped, her voice rising. She tried to push past him, but Franklin grabbed her shoulders. At that moment, he saw Elise and Margaret, their faces blurred together with Naomi's. The anger, the defiance, the hurt. It was too much. Everything that happened next was a blur. When it was over, Naomi lay still on the cold basement floor. Franklin's hands were shaking, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The next day, Franklin buried Naomi in the woods, spinning a tale about her running away. The other teens believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was their rock, their guide. Residents of Crosshaven rallied around him, offering condolences and praising his patience. It was almost enough to make him believe his own lies. That evening, Franklin sat alone in the darkened living room, the weight of his sins pressing down on him. For a moment, he thought about turning himself in. But before Franklin could act, the phone rang. "Pastor Wyatt?" the voice on the other end said. "We've got a new placement for you. A teenage girl, 15. She's had a rough go of it, but we think she'd do well in your home." Franklin closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. "Of course," he replied. "Send her over." When the girl arrived a few days later, Franklin met her at the door. She was small for her age, with wary eyes and a scowl that could cut glass. "Welcome home," he said, his voice warm and steady. She didn't respond, just brushed past him into the house as the door clicked. Storm of duality. Not again. Not so soon. Margaret's whisper carried over the silence of the house. With a fierce grip, she bit her remaining fingernail, tearing a piece off and causing the skin to bleed. Margaret stood at the window as the sky brooded, thick with the weight of an impending storm. Dark clouds churned in slow agony, twisting and folding over themselves as if writhing in torment. This storm, she knew, would continue for days. Long, agonizing days. A sharp gust of wind rattled the glass, and she flinched. The leaves outside skittered like restless spirits, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. The first patter of rain kissed the roof, soft, almost deceivingly gentle. She, however, saw through the deception. Soon, the downpour would come. The sky would open, and the world would drown in its sorrow. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. It was happening again. The slow, creeping descent. The shift within herself that she feared most. Margaret felt strangely linked to the storm. A tether that bound her to its fury, its anguish. As the clouds thickened and the thunder rumbled low in the distance, something inside her twisted. The familiar chasm in her mind yawned open, and she felt herself slipping into it. Her childhood marked her first awareness of this connection. A violent thunderstorm had raged outside, and she had found herself gripped with a restless, frantic energy. It was as though the storm had crawled inside her and filled her veins with its electric charge. Her mother had found her hours later, curled in a corner, whispering to herself, "It's not me. she had murmured over and over. It's not me. Adulthood brought no change to that feeling. The storm, the darkness, the shifting inside her. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's how it felt. Two selves coexisting in fragile balance until the storm tipped the scale. A peal of thunder cracked across the sky, and she clenched her hands into fists. The rain was coming harder now, sheets of it hammering against the house with merciless force. The wind howled, shaking the trees, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky as she moved from the window. The walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows distorting her sense of reality. She reached for the kettle with unsteady hands, trying to focus on something tangible, something real. But her fingers fumbled, and the kettle clattered to the floor with a deafening crash. Margaret gawped, stumbling back and slamming into the counter. The impact sent a jolt through her body, but it was nothing compared to the dread twisting inside her. The storm's grip extended beyond the world outside. It clawed at her very mind, unraveling her sanity, thread by thread. She could feel herself fracturing, her thoughts splintering under the immense pressure, as if something dark and insidious lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to take control. The whispering started then, not from outside, not from the wind, but from within her own head. Just surrender. It will be easier. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking her head. No, why fight it? You know this is who you are. She pressed her hands to her temples. Her breathing was increasing, like the thunder and lightning. Her ears were buzzing, overpowering the storm itself. Margaret sensed her body was detaching from itself, like her reality was crumbling to the floor. It was the storm inside her, the darkness waiting to consume her. Another crack of thunder split the sky, and a bolt of lightning illuminated the house in a stark, white flash. Margaret reconnected with her body again and felt the surge through her veins, like she poked a fork in a light socket. She glimpsed at herself in the kettle's reflection. Her dilated eyes, the size of marbles, and her pale, almost unrecognizable face stared back at her. Then she realized the storm had taken her. She staggered backward, her hands clutching at the edge of the counter. She needed to hold on, to ground herself. She didn't want to become that person. Darkness prompted unthinkable actions. It whispered to her, feeding her fears, twisting her thoughts until right and wrong blurred together. It promised relief, power, and escape from the suffocating weight of reality. But she knew the cost. She had seen it before, felt it claw at her mind, urging her to surrender. Her fingers gripped the counter tighter, nails biting into the surface. She had to resist. She fought despite the overwhelming urge to give up. Letting go felt incredibly tempting. To release pent-up emotion, to embody the storm's will. She could feel the power coiling in her chest, raw and untamed. Another roar of thunder, another crash of rain. The wind shrieked, rattling the windows as she thought they might shatter. Margaret let out a strangled sob. "Please, stop." But storms don't listen. Their anger is unrestrained, and they destroy. Tears burned fiery trails down her cheeks. She staggered forward, pressing her forehead to the cool glass of the window. The rain distorted the world outside, turning everything into an indistinct blur. Just like her mind, she had to hold on. She had to be strong and fight. With a trembling breath, she forced herself to move, to step away from the window. She grabbed the kettle from the floor and set it back on the stove, the simple motion anchoring her. She filled it with water, her fingers still shaking, but moving with purpose. The dizziness was overpowering her, while vibrations pulsate at her temples, and brief electrical shakes interrupted her thought process. She would endure the storm, both outside and within. But what awaited on the other side? Would she emerge unscathed? Or would the tempest leave its mark, reshaping her in ways she could never undo? Having put the kettle back on the counter, Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She made her way to the special place, the soundproof area, with images of forests, waterfalls, and seascape. She made sure it was stocked with water, nuts, and protein bars. This served as her refuge, untouched by inner or outer turmoil. Here, seemingly serene, she escaped chaos. Briefly rediscovering herself, Margaret cast a final glance at the furious storm, its howls clawing at the windows like a desperate specter. As she forced the door shut, the latch clicked into place, a thin barrier between her and the chaos beyond. Yet, just before the silence settled, the storm's final utterance slithered through the cracks, a venomous whisper threading into her mind. "You can never escape me. I'll always be with you." A tremor ran down her spine, but she clenched her fists, grounding herself. The storm could rage, it could scream, but she refused to let it claim her. Not tonight, and for tonight, that was enough. Warm tea, but odd aftertaste. The overgrown azaleas, camellias, and kudzu-covered trees engulf my grandmother's old country house with its petite porch and large windows. Perfume from the spring garden swirls around in the late morning air. After knocking on the door, my Aunt Arlene opens it slowly, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls escapes from the faint teal door. By the looks of the house, Arlene has not kept up appearances, nor simple maintenance. The paint's peeling, boards broken on porch, and even shingles missing from the roof are major issues I calculate in my first 5 minutes here. My aunt inherits the house after Nan, my grandmother, who died under questionable circumstances. "Come in, my sweet boy," Aunt Arlene says as she waves me in. "I'm so glad you came." I haven't seen my Aunt Arlene since my father's service. She hardly spoke to anyone there, and her reasoning is it's her only bother, and losing him meant she is all alone now, even though I'm still here. It causes her such great pain she didn't even come to the reading of his will. For Christ's sakes, it was just me, for my mother passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago, and my grandparents died about 15 years ago. So I am the only other family she has. She shuffles across the vestibule towards the front sitting room. The morning sun bakes the overly stuffed room. "Please have a seat, my dear." She motions towards a chair near a coffee table. Then she sits across from me on a satin love seat. Underneath the sugary sweet smell of rolls lies a stale, almost mildew stank that stings my nose. The coffee table has stacks of mail and smut novels, along with a sterling silver tray with tiny teacups, sugar dish, and dessert plates. Over the fireplace, cobwebs blanket the matching pair of candelabras, with a trail leading to dancing figurines, which are broken in this place and that. "I'm sorry about your father," she says, while her jowls jiggle among a slit mouth. She brings up a handkerchief to the corner of her lips. Her head and hands shake a bit, as if she's strung up by marionette threads and the puppeteer isn't paying attention. "I'm sorry as well. I know you and Dad were so close," I add. When I adjust my khakis pants, a loud pop comes from the chair cushion, so I gently lean back with my hands on my knees to avoid moving again, just waiting for the chair to cave in. Aunt Arlene straightens her lace collar on her well-pressed dress, like she didn't hear the my ass breaking the chair. "You know your parents always wanted to give you a little sister, but I believe your mother only wanted a girl she could dress up in fancy little dresses." Arlene sighs. She tinkers her dainty gold watch on her wrist. It's so small, I doubt she could even read it. This place seems to have paused the minute my grandpap died. Even the grandfather clock in the corner, which keeps eternal hands at 10 and 2. I don't know how old my aunt is, but when I was little, I would pretend that she was like 110. She carries herself all hunched over with gnarled hands that look like they don't even open anymore. The hair she keeps in perfect curls tight to her head, with the typical old lady hat adorning the top with the matching gloves. She is defiantly older than my father, by 20 years at least, because the endless griping over his birth. Aunt Arlene would have been an only child if it wasn't for him. Then, being a boy, my grandparents adore him and spoiled him to no end. When they became adults, he was given the family cattle ranch, along with the larger homestead. But as I said before, they didn't completely write out Arlene. I just don't think they trusted her to manage the business. Her anger got the better of her one time, and she threatened my dad that she would get her share by any means. So how are things going? Good, I guess. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to take over the ranch, though, I said. Well, I can understand that. You're still so immature to have such a large responsibility over so many people and money, she says with tight lips. My eyes about popped out of my head, and how can she sit there staring at me as if that's not an insult? You know that I've graduated with a master's in agricultural sciences with a BS in business. And not only that, I've worked for Dad since I could walk. I've spent the last 3 years working on networking and research to increase production. I can feel my face boiling red, for Aunt Arlene knows all of this. She constantly interferes with my dad's decisions to include me in any of the family business. She clears her throat. It's one thing to wrangle calves down in front of a crowd to impress young farm girls. It's another to manage $1 million cattle ranch with trucks and employees. I'm still not sure why your father didn't place me on the executive committee. I mean, at least until you're old enough to make managerial decisions. The ranch hands don't even trust you yet. And some bits of paper isn't going to get you respect in this field. She claps her mouth shut. My chest tightens, and I feel like my head is about to explode all over this ugly antique rug. Deep breaths. Take deep breaths. I run my hands down my face and squeeze my eyes shut. My Aunt Arlene has always been like this, though. She believes we didn't run the ranch how Grandpap wanted, and he would be disappointed in my dad. I just want to tell her, then why the hell didn't he give you the ranch instead? The grudge she holds against my dad seems to have gone to the grave, which is a damn shame. Well, Arlene, my dad has already proven. Ringing came from the kitchen. She promptly stood up. I've baked us some goodies, my dear boy. She gave me the oddest smile. She locks her heavily wrinkled eyes to mine, which appear to be shiny, then smiles with every single tooth. Her stare sets into my soul, but breaks when a whistle from a kettle starts. As she turns to walk toward the door, she twirls on her toes, as if she is floating across the maple floor, and disappears. I hear clanking of china and spoons coming from the dark hallway. Then oven door opens and closes. Why don't you help me for a second? She bellows. As I get up from the chair, the spring bounces back into place with a crack. I shake my head. I'm not sure why I came. I wander down the damp hallway towards a swinging kitchen door that looks like a portal to another world. Here, She hands me a small carafe. Could you please add some milk to this? She plates the pan of hot rolls onto a floral china platter. Can you carry the milk and teapot for me? There's too much to juggle here. She turns and vanishes from the kitchen. I try to follow her, but my knuckles are burning just a bit from the side of hot teapot. So by the time I make it back to the sitting room, she is ready to hand me a place with a cinnamon roll on it. How do you like your tea? She asks. But before I can say, she starts humming Old Rugged Cross. I decide to change seats, for I am certain that the chair is on the edge of collapse. I like a little sugar. No milk, I answer, while dropping into the love seat. She clinks around the serving tray, mixing the teas. Here you go, my dear. She smiles again, passing me the cup and saucer. Is there a reason you asked me here? I'm kind of busy dealing with all this stuff with Dad, I said, while taking a sip of dark tea. It hit really strong and bitter, almost like eating soap. I couldn't help but to screw up my face and swallow hard. Well then, down the hatch, I held my breath and sucked the rest of the cup. I didn't think you could screw up tea, but there's always a first. So here's to the cinnamon rolls for being better. I hold it up as if I'm toasting my dad. The first bite proves it to be edible. Oh, no real reason. I just wanted to see my only nephew. Arlene answers with a blow and sip of tea. She takes a deep breath of tea in and continues to sip her tea. To my understanding, it's just the two of us now, no other relatives, she says. Is there a young lady in the picture? No, I say. Cough. Another bite. I put the teacup on the table. I'm not seeing anyone right now. You need more tea, she says. But before I could answer no, she snatches the cup and fills it with more and adds more sugar. Here I added more sugar to it. She hands the cup back, and I take a sip. Nope, just as bitter as before. Another cough. I made a new flavor of tea. It's a bit darker than my usual, but I didn't think it was that strong. Want me to add some milk? She reaches out for my cup again. I wave my hand to decline and chug the remaining. Cough. A pain in my stomach slams into my ribs, and the cinnamon roll tries to run up my throat. I'm not feeling too... But before I could get the words out, the world blurs, and my head feels like it's full of lead, and I feel my body slide down the love seat to the floor. Well, my darling nephew, I've grown tired of you and your father taking from me, and now I'm finally getting what is rightfully mine. I hope you enjoy your last meal. I really do think the oleander tea tastes better with some milk. Aunt Arlene's large smile fades to black. Reality checked. Maggie stared out the kitchen window, her brow knitted in quiet contemplation as she waited for her coffee to finish brewing. The sun poured through the window, warm and radiant. Yet something felt off. It had rained throughout the night. She recalled the rhythmic pitter-patter against her bedroom window and the wind wailing through the trees. The forecast had called for more storms well into late afternoon. However, outside, the world looked untouched, as if the night's downpour had never happened. She recalled having drinks with her best friends from college last night at the new upscale lounge downtown. Lori had been eager to check out the exclusive rooftop bar, but the rain had forced them to stay inside. Instead, they gathered in one of the lounge's sleek, dimly lit sections, sipping mojitos and catching up. Lori had always dreamed of becoming a corporate attorney, and after years of relentless studying and grueling internships, she had finally landed a position at one of Pittsburgh's top law firms earlier this year. It was all she had ever wanted, and from the way she spoke about it, the long hours and high stakes didn't faze her in the slightest. Sammy and Chloe also seemed to have settled comfortably into their dream careers. Sammy, with her sharp wit and boundless creativity, was making a name for herself in marketing, crafting campaigns for major brands. Chloe, whom she had known since third grade and always the most compassionate of the group, had pursued a career in healthcare, working as a pediatric nurse, the job she had dreamed of since childhood. As Maggie sat there, she couldn't help but wonder if she was the only one still searching for a sense of purpose, trapped in a routine she couldn't escape. Suddenly, the coffee pot beeped, a sharp, cheerful sound, as if proudly announcing the completion of its task. The abrupt noise jolted Maggie from her thoughts, pulling her away from the window. With a sigh, she grabbed the pot and poured the steaming coffee into her oversized pit mug. She and her friends had bought matching mugs from the university shop, a sentimental keepsake to mark their transition from students to University of Pittsburgh alumni. Back then, they had imagined themselves stepping into bright, promising careers, proudly flaunting their school spirit in their new offices. But as Maggie wrapped her fingers around the familiar ceramic, she couldn't ignore the nagging truth. Her future hadn't turned out the way she once envisioned. Maggie took a sip of her coffee and immediately winced at the bitterness, the sharp taste jolting her from her distracted thoughts. She'd forgotten to add the creamer. Heading toward the refrigerator, a realization settled over her. It was Sunday, grocery day. With a resigned sigh, she set down her mug, shuffled to her bedroom to change, then grabbed her purse and keys and headed out the door. The moment she stepped outside, the air was warm and rich with the scent of sun-soaked earth and blooming wildflowers. No trace of petrichor, no lingering dampness on the pavement. It was as if the storm she so vividly remembered had never happened at all. Maggie swallowed, her throat dry and tight. Something was off. She could feel it in her bones. an uncanny sense that the world had shifted on its axis while she slept. She glanced across the street and noticed her neighbors gathered on their lawns, laughing and chatting as if it were a holiday. Odd, she thought. But what unsettled her most was Mr. Burns. The older man was usually a storm cloud of irritation, no matter the day. He'd spent his life working at the same furniture store his great-great-grandfather had built, forever grumbling about long hours and slow employees. Just yesterday, after another exhausting Saturday shift, his voice had carried across the street, complaining about sluggish junior workers, while his wife, Mrs. Burns, stood by the door, nodding in passive agreement, with an umbrella in hand as he stomped into the house. But today, he was all smiles, chatting with the Morgans and the Wilsons, laughing as if he didn't have a single care in the world. Just then, Mr. Burns looked over, spotted her, and waved. "Good morning, Maggie." "Good morning, Mr. Burns," Maggie said, her voice tinged with bewilderment. He grinned and called out, "When you get a chance this week, stop by the store. I'll give you a discount on any furniture you want. We just received an investment, and things are really looking up." "Oh, wow, that's wonderful," Maggie replied, trying to mask the confusion on her face. Mr. Burns had never spoken to her before. A grunt or a quick nod was all she ever got. It was always Mrs. Burns who was the social one. Maggie's skin prickled. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she climbed into her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Something definitely isn't right, she thought. First, the weather seemed odd, and now her neighbor was acting like an entirely different person. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I didn't sleep well, and the mojitos from last night aren't sitting well with me. But no matter how she tried to rationalize it, every instinct screamed that something was undeniably wrong. The drive to the grocery store was oddly surreal. Streets that normally peppered with Sunday morning traffic were unsettlingly quiet. The few cars she passed moved at an unhurried pace, their drivers smiling and waving as if caught up in some unspoken festivity. Pedestrians strolled along the sidewalks with a light-hearted spring in their step, while dogs pranced happily alongside their humans, tails wagging as if the entire world was enveloped in an unfamiliar sense of joy. As she pulled into the parking lot of Greenfields Market, her unease deepened. The vast stretch of asphalt, usually packed with cars on a Sunday morning, was nearly empty. Only a handful of vehicles sat scattered across the grocery store lot, gleaming under the strangely intense sunlight like polished gems. She cautiously eased into a parking space near the entrance and cut the engine. For a moment, She just sat there, fingers still resting on the steering wheel as she scanned her surroundings, trying to steady her thoughts. "What is going on?" she whispered to herself. Finally, after calming herself, she grabbed her purse and stepped out of the car. The door closed shut behind her, the sound echoing across the parking lot, unnervingly loud against the surrounding stillness. As she approached the store, the automatic doors slid open with an almost too cheerful whoosh, releasing a wave of cool, conditioned air. The familiar fluorescent glow spilled onto the pavement, blinding her momentarily, forcing her to blink rapidly to adjust her eyes. Her gaze landed on the store employees gathered at the entrance, their faces lit with excitement as they chatted and laughed. They held a large banner that read, "Welcome to Greenfields Market. Happy grand reopening. A new beginning awaits." A grand reopening? This surprised Maggie. She had been at this store just a few days ago, and there had been no sign of renovations, no announcements, no changes, nothing to suggest something like this was happening. She forced a smile at the employees as she walked past, gripping her purse handle tightly. Grabbing a cart, she headed toward the produce section, trying once again to shake off the uneasiness rising in her chest. Maggie quickly grabbed her usual grocery items and a few snacks, hurrying toward the register. Despite the small number of customers, the store hummed with an unusual liveliness. As she made her way through the aisles, everything seemed different. The store fully stocked the shelves with fresh produce, neatly arranged in vibrant displays. Maggie couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't just a grand reopening. It felt like an entirely new store. Yet everything looked exactly as it always had. As she fumbled with her wallet, she heard someone call her name. "Maggie, so nice to see you today. How are you?" It was Jen from her yoga class. Maggie barely managed a smile as she turned to face her. "I'm good. Just doing a little shopping," she replied, her voice flat with a forced smile. "Oh, I totally get it." Jen chuckled. "I'm getting ready for the week too. Can't wait. You won't believe it, but I got a promotion to regional manager last Thursday. Can you believe it? I'm doing what I always wanted." Maggie froze. "Wait, what? I thought you said you hated your job. You even told me you were looking for something else, even if they offered you a promotion." Jen placed a hand on Maggie's shoulder, her face glowing with excitement. "Not anymore. It's my dream job now, Maggie. Isn't it amazing? It feels like a new beginning." Maggie felt a wave of nausea rise in her stomach. Her head spun, and her heart began to race. This didn't feel right. How could everything change so suddenly? The world felt like it was wrapped in some strange, happy haze. How was everyone so cheerful? They continued sharing a little small talk and hugged goodbye just as the cashier finished ringing up Maggie's items. But Maggie's mind was miles away. As if on autopilot, she barely noticed the total as she grabbed her bags and hurried out. Slipping into her car, she leaned back in the seat, feeling disoriented. What was going on? I need caffeine, she muttered, hoping the words would ground her. She headed to the local cafe, desperate for a mocha to shake the eerie feeling that had taken over her, hoping it would wake her up, both literally and figuratively. As Maggie stepped into the cafe, she was taken aback by the atmosphere. It wasn't the usual hectic, impatient crowd, with long lines and customers in a rush. Instead, the cafe was filled with a relaxed energy. People were chatting casually, laughing, and smiling as they sipped their drinks. Then, out of nowhere, one of her co-workers from the hotel, Tim, walked in. His face lit up with a big grin. Their eyes met, and he waved enthusiastically as he made his way toward her, skillfully weaving through customers who were leaving. "Maggie, how are you?" Tim called out, his voice full of excitement. "I'm hanging in there," Maggie replied, still trying to make sense of the strange energy in the air as he joined the line behind her. Tim worked as a bartender at the hotel and was also an aspiring musician, playing local gigs with his band. "Maggie, you won't believe it." Tim's eyes were sparkling as he leaned in closer. "I just signed a huge deal." "What? No way. Congratulations, Tim," Maggie exclaimed, her surprise matching the excitement in his voice. Tim couldn't contain his joy. "Yeah, my band got signed to a record label yesterday. It's my dream, and it's happening." Maggie shouted along with him, her mind still on guard. As Maggie picked up her mocha and exchanged goodbyes with Tim, she slowly made her way to the cafe door, still trying to process what she'd just heard. She was genuinely happy for him, but it felt like everyone's life was suddenly falling perfectly into place. Everyone except hers. She stepped outside into the warm air, the cafe's artificial ambiance fading behind her. As her foot hit the pavement and the fresh air brushed her face, a shiver ran through her, a silent reminder that something was wrong. The streets remained unnervingly serene. Everywhere she looked, people seemed to be exactly where they were meant to be. As she drove home, the familiar scene mirrored the one she had seen on her way to the store. She passed a man sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook, his face radiating quiet contentment. A woman jogged by, her expression one of pure determination, as if every step brought her closer to her passion. Even the baristas at the cafe earlier seemed to move in perfect harmony, clearly in their element. It was as if the world had shifted into some perfect version of itself. where everyone had found their calling. Maggie's stomach tightened as she pulled into her driveway, the weight of the day settling in. The laughter, the smiles, the overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It all felt surreal and too perfect. She quickly collected her groceries and rushed into her apartment, her haven from the unsettling aura of perfection that seemed to envelop everyone around her. How could everyone else be so content, so perfectly aligned with their passions, while she felt like she was just existing? The world outside her window seemed too vibrant, too flawless. The more she thought about it, the more it felt like a carefully crafted facade, one that taunted her with its perfection, mocking her unfulfilled aspirations. After putting away the groceries, she glanced out the window and noticed the sky had darkened. Was it that late already? The day had passed in a blur. With a sigh, she turned her attention to getting her uniform ready for work. She mentally ran through her usual Monday routine. Oh, that's right, she reminded herself. I need to meet with Mr. Carrollson about booking the VIP hall for this week's seminar. Since the large banquet hall is undergoing emergency renovations. Are you happy, Maggie? The thought surfaced unexpectedly. Is this really what you want? 2 years from now? 5? 10? The questions lingered, unsettling and impossible to ignore. No, I'm not happy, she whispered at first, then repeated louder. I'm not happy. I'm a 29-year-old front office supervisor, stuck in a monotonous routine, she cried out, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. Her voice trembled with frustration as she continued, her emotions pouring out unchecked. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't the life I dreamed of. She dropped to the floor, fists tightly clenched, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with every breath. My dreams, my life, everyone around me is thriving, doing what they love, and I'm just stuck. The realization crushed her. The contrast between her stagnant reality and the world's perfect harmony pressing in like an unbearable weight. Seeing her friends last night had left her feeling small, inadequate. They had all progressed into their ideal careers. And when the conversation had focused on her, she attempted to joke and dismiss it with a nonchalant, "Oh, I just changed direction." But the truth was harder to admit, even to herself. Somewhere along the way, ambition had quietly given way to stability. The drive she once had, the fire that pushed her forward, had dimmed, replaced by routine and practicality. And now, as she neared 30, she woke each morning with a dull, persistent ache of regret, haunted by the question, why had I just simply settled for this life? She had long since convinced herself that she was fine, that comfort and security were enough. But were they? Seeing her friends thrive, their eyes alight with passion for the things they loved, had stirred something restless inside her. Do you keep going like this? Waking up every day to the same boring routine, letting time slip through your fingers? Or do you finally take a stand, make a change, and pursue the life and career you truly want? The thought gave her chills. Change was terrifying, but an unfulfilled life was worse. If she didn't decide now, would she still be here years from now, trapped in the same cycle, suffocating under the weight of what-ifs? She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. The choice was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to take the steps necessary to make the change. Maggie felt the weight of the day finally lift, the uneasiness that had clung to her dissipating. As she climbed into bed, a sense of determination settled over her. She was ready to embrace change, to carve out a future she truly wanted. Soon after she drifted to sleep, a loud, thunderous boom jolted her awake. Her eyes snapped open, blinking rapidly as she tried to gather her bearings. Rain pounded against the window, the storm outside mirroring the confusion swirling inside her. Half asleep, she reached for her phone. The screen lit up. 5:34 a.m. Sunday. Squinting, she frowned. Wait, Sunday? Did I read that right? She gasped, sitting up quickly, her heart racing. That couldn't be right. She had just lived through an entire day. She had gone shopping, talked to Jen, seen Tim, struggled with her emotions. How could it possibly be Sunday morning again? Scrambling for answers, she lunged for the TV remote and turned it on. The menu flashed across the screen. Sunday, 5:35 a.m. Her pulse roared in her ears. Oh, my goodness. Was it all just a dream? She whispered, her mind racing to make sense of it. A breathless, incredulous laugh escaped her. It was all just a dream. A weird, unsettling dream. Yet, as the initial shock settled, another thought took its place. It had felt so real, so vivid, like she had actually lived it. But more than that, it had forced her to confront the very things she had been avoiding. Her doubts, her fears, and her regrets. Seeing her friends had been the catalyst, but the dream had been the wake-up call. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't merely just a dream. Maybe it was a sign to stop waiting for the world to change for her. There's still time to pursue her dreams and embrace new beginnings. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be exciting. Repercussion. I remember the car crash that took my grandmother's life, like it was yesterday. And when I say I remember, I mean vividly, because I was in the passenger seat. We hit an oncoming vehicle, trying to overtake on a blind bend. My grandmother seemed to register the car and sighed at the inevitable. Everything happened in slow motion. The sound of metal crushing, air whooshing past where it shouldn't. The man who was trying to overtake hit the driver's side of my car and ended up hitting a tree and burning to death after impact. It felt like we were spinning for ages. I had looked over at my grandmother, hunched over, a look of pure terror mirroring my own. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was told the woman in the third car avoided the crash completely and pulled up onto the grassy bank on the other side of the road from where the car was burning to call the police. My mother was a wreck for weeks after, ranting at me from the minute I opened my eyes in the hospital bed. How could you let her drive, Anne? It was your car, your responsibility. The doctor, with his blue scrubs and shaved head, said it was a miracle. I only had a fractured wrist and concussion, considering my grandmother had split her head open, lost her arm with the car door, and had a heart attack as she bled out. I knew my mother's rage was mostly because I was unconscious for the last few moments of her mother's life, where she died alone and in pain. My father tried to reassure me that it wasn't my fault, but I knew it was. I knew she would still be here if I had driven. The morning of the crash, she had walked the mile or so. It was from her house to ours, hoping we could go shopping together, as she did almost every Saturday since I got my license. Because I idolized her, when she asked to drive us, I would always let her, every time. I wasn't allowed to visit her, lying in rest in the chapel. It will upset the aunts and uncles too much, was the excuse my mother used. She was the heart and soul of the family, you understand. But I didn't. She was my grandmother. She was part of me too. They should have let me say goodbye. A week after the funeral, the dreams started. She always turned up at the front door, asking if I wanted to go shopping with her, much like she did the morning of the crash. Those first few weeks, I always woke up not long after I saw her standing there, the terror jolting me out of the dream. I rarely dreamt before the crash. Sleep then had been beautiful blackness. I prayed for a dreamless sleep to return, growing weary of the overactive repetition of my sleeping mind. As time went on and winter came around, the dreams uncontrollably got longer. I would agree to drive her, and as I walked out the front door in my dream, she would start having a heart attack, falling to the ground in a pile of blood that rose from the grassy lawn. When I told my father about this, fearful of letting my mother know, he put it down to the medication I was on. He took me back to the doctors, who prescribed me something else to try. The dreams didn't stop, but they didn't get worse either. I tried to return to normal, going to volleyball practice and on date nights with my boyfriend, Phil. It worked for a little while, Nearly 2 months after the crash, I opened my curtains one morning and looked down at the lawn, as I had done every morning of my life, to see someone standing at the end of the drive, about 100 yards away. I didn't pay much attention to them the first day, or second. On the third day, the person moved a bit closer to the house, as if demanding to be seen. My grandmother looked up at me with a blank expression. I shut the curtains, trying to ignore the apparition. I was convinced death was coming to get me, so I stopped sleeping, afraid I wouldn't wake up. The lack of sleep meant grandmother was around more, stalking me from a closer proximity, standing behind me in the mirror as I washed my face in the morning, sitting in the back of the car when my mother took me to school, walking past me in the hallways at school. I was grateful she remained silent, and her right arm was still intact. She had given me a cross for my 10th birthday, and I dug it out of my closet and started wearing it constantly, hoping it would ward off her spirit, or at least trick my brain into warding her off. But the cross did nothing. I Googled ways to relax. It told me to take a bath and eat healthier food. I was barely eating, so I took a bath. Everything was okay until the bath water turned bright red like fresh blood, and I passed out from a mixture of fear and lack of food. My mother found me hours later, prune-like and shivering in the water. "Can't you see it?" I said through chattering teeth. She looked over my body as if checking for injury. "See what? What did you do?" I spoke slowly, my voice raspy. "The bath is filled with blood." My mother flinched, as though I had slapped her, then pulled the plug out and let the bath drain. Then she wrapped me in 3 towels and bundled me downstairs to sit in front of the fire, where I watched my grandmother's face dance behind the flames. One Saturday, at the height of my newfound insanity, as Phil was cooking us dinner in his family home, he called me by her name, Hazel. I got a head rush from the shock, and I closed my eyes for a few seconds while I waited for it to pass. When I opened my eyes again, my grandmother appeared in front of me, where I stood by the stove, smiling at me for the first time since she had appeared posthumously. I started screaming. Weeks of no sleep, being haunted by your dead grandmother, will eventually make you lose your mind. Phil couldn't calm me down and ended up calling my parents to come and get me. No one else could see her standing there smiling, her mouth twisted more to the right than I remembered. Her eyes followed me wherever I went in the room, but she remained in place. "Maybe we need to take her to see a specialist," I heard my mother say to my father as I sobbed in the back seat of the car. "She already has a doctor. There's something not right about her. Not anymore. She needs to see a psychiatrist or something." But the specialist, who prescribed me even more pills, told me repeatedly that at 17, I wasn't seeing my dead grandmother, You just have clinical exhaustion. You'll be fine." That night, I took the new pills I had been given to put me to sleep, only to be woken up by the feeling of hands around my neck, crushing my windpipe. I opened my eyes to see my grandmother standing over me as I lay in bed, unable to move. "What a shame," my grandmother hissed, her voice deep and not at all the sweet sing-song voice she had in life. I needed her to stop haunting me. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I fought to get the words out. "I would do anything to trade places with you. Anything." Her mouth pulled up slowly on the right side. "Anything?" I was gasping in the dark. No, not gasping. Choking. Choking on something in my throat. A snake crawled into my mouth and was snaking its way to my stomach. I could feel my lips around its slimy body. "She's awake," I heard my mother say. Couldn't she see I was being suffocated? I peeled back my dry eyelids as the snake started to move, feeling a lot like this was the end, especially when I was met with blinding light, blinking until the room came into focus. To first see the doctor with his shaved head, who was pulling a tube out of my mouth. Then I noticed my mother to the right of me, standing up next to the bed. Father sat beside her. Furthest away from me was my grandmother, standing in the doorway, her lips taut in a wry smile. "I was going to be sick. It's okay, Anne. It's okay," my mother began, stroking my hair as soon as the doctor was finished. "You were in an accident, but you're okay." This wasn't happening. Or rather, this had already happened, hadn't it? I went to wipe my tears away with my right hand, but for some reason, I couldn't move it. Grandmother still stood in the doorway, now expressionless. I tried to see what was trapping my right arm, but I couldn't see anything for the sheet covering me. "You were in a car crash, darling. But my mother couldn't continue, breaking into sobs. I tried to say, "What?" but it came out all muffled and wrong. My tongue, somehow, too big for my mouth. My father was shaking his head. "You were in a car crash, Anne," grandmother said. Her voice that had evaded me for weeks was frail and dry. "The impact tore your right arm off." No, this wasn't happening. I was shaking my head frantically. The doctor was concerned with my heart rate and hyperventilation, injecting me with something that made the world go fuzzy. Grandmother moved closer to me in my haze, still not smiling. She seemed to be talking to my parents about something, but I couldn't hear them. The drugs were too powerful. Reality eventually slipped away, and I fell into a dreamless sleep for once. When I woke up, I opened my eyes to my dimly lit bedroom at home, looking exactly as it had on the morning of the crash. My heart was pounding in my chest. I kept telling myself it was a dream. It was all just a dream. The crash, the hospital, everything. But I was too scared to move, for fear I discovered my right arm was missing. The drought, summer, died 50 years ago, and autumn never came. The sky was a hard shell of endless blue, unbroken by clouds, as if God had dipped his paintbrush in cobalt and forgotten to rinse it out. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt like restless ghosts, and the air tasted faintly of burnt rubber and dust, the stale breath of a town stuck in time. Cedar Ridge had always been small, a thumbprint on the back roads of nowhere. There were farms, of course, though most had dried up and blown away with the last real rain. What remained were brittle corn stalks, blackened and skeletal, standing in neat rows like mourners at a graveside. The few farmers left mumbled about drought-resistant crops, but spoke of miracles with the same dry hopelessness they reserved for paying taxes. Rust scabs bloomed on the water towers, and the gas station on Main Street had stopped carrying windshield wiper fluid years ago. No need for it when the sky never wept. They still sold beer, though, and on days when the heat pressed down like a fist, the townsfolk gathered in the shade of the Sinclair station's green dinosaur sign, cold cans sweating in their hands. It was there, leaning against the faded scales of that prehistoric beast, that Tom Weaver saw the stranger for the first time. The man came walking up the road from the south, where the horizon quivered like molten glass. He wore black, a suit crisp as a knife edge, and carried a battered leather suitcase in one hand. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but there was something unsettling about him, even from a distance. He didn't stumble or waver in the heat the way normal men did. His stride was steady, purposeful, as if he carried winter in his pocket. "Ain't seen a salesman in years," muttered Earl Granger, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grease-streaked rag. "What the hell's he sellin'? Coffins?" The man chuckled, low and uneasy. But Tom's beer went sour on his tongue. Something about the stranger's silhouette made his skin crawl. The sharp angles, the way shadows clung to him like cobwebs, even in the brutal sunlight. The man in black reached the edge of the group and tipped his hat politely. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, startling against the deep tan of his weathered face. He looked like someone who'd walked a long way and hadn't found what he was looking for. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mighty warm today, isn't it?" Earl snorted. "Been warm every damn day since Truman was president. What's it to you?" The stranger's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm just passing through. Thought maybe you fine folks could help me with a little business matter." Tom narrowed his eyes. "What kind of business?" The man set his suitcase down with a soft thud. The latches gleamed like silver teeth as he flicked them open. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, were rows of gleaming vials filled with liquid that shimmered like captured moonlight. "I sell weather," the man said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence, followed by a bark of laughter from Earl. "Weather? You gotta be kidding me. What's next? Bottled air?" The stranger didn't flinch. "Rain, snow, a cool breeze on a summer's day. I've got it all. Guaranteed to work or your money back." Tom stepped closer, curiosity prickling beneath his unease. He peered into the case, mesmerized by the swirling colors. One vial shimmered with iridescent blues and silvers, like the reflection of moonlight on water. Another glowed a fierce, fiery red. "How much?" Tom asked before he could stop himself. The stranger's lips curved into that unsettling smile again. "For you, sir? A bargain. One memory, freely given." Tom blinked. "A memory? Just a little thing," the man assured him. "Something you won't miss. In exchange, I'll give you enough rain to fill your fields for a season." Earl spat on the ground. "This is bullshit. Come on, Tommy, let's get out of here." But Tom's heart was pounding. He thought of his farm, the cracked earth, the dying crops. Thought of his wife, Ellie, who hadn't smiled in months because she knew what was coming. The bank foreclosure, the auction, the slow death of everything they'd built together. "What kind of memory?" Tom asked hoarsely. The stranger's eyes gleamed. "Oh, just a small one. Perhaps the taste of your first kiss, the sound of your mother's laughter. Nothing important." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." The man in black extended a gloved hand, and Tom shook it. The air shimmered between them, and for a moment, Tom felt a strange, dizzying tug deep in his chest, like something had been gently plucked from inside him. When it was over, the stranger handed him a vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. "Pour this over your fields tonight," he instructed. "And remember, the bargain is sealed." Tom barely heard him. His mind was already racing with visions of green fields and heavy rain. That night, under a sky still stubbornly cloudless, Tom stood at the edge of his withered fields. The brittle corn stalks rattled faintly in the dry breeze, a chorus of death. His hands trembled as he uncorked the vial, the shimmering blue liquid catching what little starlight there was. The scent hit him first, clean, sharp, like distant lightning and wet pavement after a storm. It was a smell he hadn't known in years. Taking a deep breath, Tom tilted the vial and let the liquid trickle out. It splattered onto the cracked, dust-hardened earth with a faint hiss, vanishing almost instantly into the thirsty ground. He watched, breath tight in his chest, waiting for something, anything to happen. At first, there was only soot, thick and suffocating. Then the earth shuddered beneath his feet, subtle as a heartbeat, but growing stronger. The low, primal growl of thunder rolled across the sky, distant yet powerful, like some ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, cool and damp, carrying with it the promise of deliverance. A single drop splattered against Tom's forehead, cold and startling. He blinked, hardly daring to believe it. Another drop, then another, until the heavens opened with a sudden, furious roar. Rain came down in sheets, wild, relentless, drenching him in moments. The smell of wet earth rose around him, rich and intoxicating. Dust turned to mud beneath his boots as rivulets of water carved new paths through the parched ground. Tom threw back his head and laughed. A raw, unhinged sound torn from somewhere deep inside him. He spread his arms wide, welcoming the downpour like a sinner at baptism. Water slicked his hair to his scalp and dripped from his chin. But he didn't care. His laughter mingled with the storm, defiant and joyful. The fields drank greedily, the dead husks of corn softening, straightening, as though waking from a long nightmare. Leaves unfurled, vibrant green bleeding back into lifeless stalks. The transformation was swift and almost magical. A resurrection right before his eyes. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a pale new sun. Tom stood at the edge of his fields, now lush and vibrant, the corn standing tall and proud, shimmering with droplets of water. The air smelled sweet, alive. The screen door creaked, and Ellie came running out of the house, bare feet splashing through puddles. Her face was radiant with disbelief, tears mingling with the remnants of rain. "Tom? How?" she gasped, her voice breaking with wonder. He didn't answer. Words seemed pointless. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, fierce and grateful, as if sealing a promise between them. For the first time in years, Cedar Ridge felt alive, and hope, long buried beneath drought and despair, bloomed anew. The stranger returned a week later. Tom saw him standing by the gas station, his black suit immaculate despite the mud that clung to everyone else's boots. He knew, deep down, that this was no coincidence. "What do you want?" Tom demanded, his voice rough. The man's smile was razor sharp. "Just checking in. How's the farm?" "It's fine. Better than fine. Glad to hear it." The stranger's eyes glittered. "But you see, Mr. Weaver, memories are tricky things. Sometimes they're connected in ways we don't expect." Tom frowned. What are you talking about? The man tilted his head. Tell me, Tom, do you remember your wife's name? Tom opened his mouth, then froze. A cold dread crept up his spine. He could see her face clearly. Her bright eyes, the curve of her smile. But her name was gone, slipped through his fingers like water. No, Tom whispered, horror dawning. No, that's not possible. Ah, the stranger said softly. A shame. But as I said, a small thing. Nothing important. Tom lunged at him, but the man in black was already walking away, his silhouette dissolving into the shimmering heat. The rain never came again, and neither did Tom's wife. At least, not in any way that mattered. She was still there, smiling and talking. But her name was a hollow echo in Tom's mind, forever lost to the drought. And so Cedar Ridge, baked under the unchanging sun, its people haunted by what they'd forgotten, lost hope. January 20th, 2025, Entry 1. It all happened so fast. All I could grab was my journal and a few pens. Alarms began blaring, and Dad rushed me. Mom and David down into a bunker? I don't know when we got a bunker or why, but it was deep under our house. It's spooky down here. One light source in the center of the room, only 2 mattresses, and the rest of the space is full of lugatons and jugs of water. I'm not sure how long we're going to be down here, so I figured journaling would be fun, though no one's answering my questions. Dad looks more serious than usual. He's been checking his pocket watch since we got here. Mom hasn't stopped pacing around, and David the deadbeat sat right on a mattress when we got down here. I don't want to be the only kid down here, so hopefully it only lasts a few days. January 23rd, 2025. Entry 2. The alarms and sirens from above finally stopped today. They made it hard to sleep, but it wasn't like it was easy to sleep in the first place. The beds were made for a kid half my size, and me and Mom had to share, so it was cramped. I still don't know why we are down here, but it's looking like it's going to be a little longer than a few days. It smells down here. The hole we potty in is deep, but the smell still sneaks up and fills the room with stench. And I'm not a fan of the food. I preferred the terrible food we got from the middle school. Then these cans. I wonder what my friends are doing. I miss them. January 28th, 2025. Entry 3. I hear people above. They sound sick and like they need help. Bangs and booms, groaning and wheezing. These sounds echoing through the bunker. But Dad says we can't help them. But if they're outside, why are we trapped in here? Also, David keeps looking at me funny. I don't like it. It ruins our card games. February 1st, 2025. Entry 4. I would have been such a great weather girl. I was always jealous of the ladies on TV. They were so pretty. but I can always guess the weather in the bunker. A high chance of inhaling bodily fumes, followed by boredom for the entire day. Stay safe, folks. It looks like this has no mention of ending anytime soon. No time soon. February 3rd, 2025. Entry 5. I got curious. This bunker didn't just appear. Dad must have built it. And that means he knew something. Knew this was coming. Why didn't he warn us? He has a small leather journal. Keeps it tucked inside his blazer pocket. I know I shouldn't, but I need to see what's inside. February 7th, 2025. Entry 6. I started bleeding. I didn't know what to do. I just kept crying and crying. My mom was trying to comfort and explain what was happening, but I thought I was dying. It didn't help that David kept looking at the stain on my pants. I was so embarrassed. I hate him. I hate having to be around him, and he won't stop looking at me. I wish I could just vanish. February 8th, 2025. Entry 7. I stayed up while everyone was sleeping. Dad doesn't sleep with his blazer on, so I was able to grab the journal and look through it. None of it made sense, though. There were just symbols scribbled all through the journal, but I've seen him writing in it. Why draw these symbols? What does it mean? I also think David caught me snooping, because when I walked over to his and Dad's bed, he was shifting around. If he tells I don't know what Dad will do. February 10th, 2025. Entry 8. David never said anything about the journal, so I think I'm in the clear. I'm becoming direly bored. David sits on his bed all day. Mom keeps replaying solitaire, and Dad is just checking his watch and journaling. No conversation is killing me. There's nothing new, no fresh air, and I never know if it's nighttime or not. If this is survival, is it even worth it? February 10th, 2025. Entry 9. I climbed to the top of the ladder to see if I could hear anything. I almost fell down because the ladder was old and the bars shifted. That fall could have been really bad. Most of the noises from above had stopped, and so it's just been silence. But when I pressed my ear to the hatch, I could feel vibrations, almost like a buzzing, like a wasp. There's still a world out there, I think. February 12th, 2025. Entry 9. I asked Dad about the buzzing, since now it's loud enough to be slightly heard from in the bunker. He, of course, didn't answer me, but he looked concerned by me asking. I couldn't take it. He had just stared at the hatch and then gave me his pocket watch. February. So much has happened. I lost my pens, so I couldn't write anything. It all feels so frozen. Nothing is moving anymore. Nothing's the same. My mind has run out of thoughts. The noises above are muffled. The only thing I feel is my heart bumping in my chest. Dad stopped checking his watch. He no longer writes anymore. I miss showering. My body is so dirty. even though I scrub so much. No matter how hard I try, the dirt won't come off. I catch my dad looking at the ceiling every day now. He's probably thinking what we both have been thinking this entire time. Is it safe to go up yet? He always looks scared whenever the thought crosses his mind. I can see it, his dread of what's to come. Why won't he tell me? Is it so terrible? Maybe I should find out for myself. It would be better than being in this casket. I'm tired of soup. I'm so tired. I want him to hug me. I want a hug so bad. It's been so long since I've been hugged. But I can't. I can't accept his comfort. It's hurting him to know he can't help me. A hug from Mom would've. She gave the best hugs. The buzzings never stopped before. So many continuous days with that buzzing in my ear. It's finally gone. Something changed. I have to take this chance. Dad would try to stop me if he knew. I have to do it now while he's asleep. I know you're reading this now, Dad. I love you. I wasn't strong enough. Forgive me. In our blood, can expect heavy thunderstorms from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Chris's radio buzzed as he trundled down the exit to the rest stop. Windshield wipers working overtime as the rain and wind pelted his semi. He would have to wait out the storm, lest he risk ending up in a ditch. All the better for me, he thought to himself as he pulled up to the truck stop. I can finally look for someone to play with. Chris had been a trucker for years, enjoying the solitude of the road and the freedoms it granted him. Were he to succeed at his goals, he would need space and quiet. His roots offered him just that. Nobody had caught on to him yet, though the news was always warning potential victims away from hitchhiking. He was a legend along I-80, killing travelers and truckers alike. He climbed out of his truck, hurrying inside the rest stop as the rain poured. The place was completely dead. Chris sighed, cursing his bad luck. First the storm, and now nobody around to play with. He was going to have to keep moving, wasn't he? His fingers itched to grasp a life by the throat, to tear it apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but red. It had been too long since he had had free rein. He thought back to his last hunt. He had snuffed out a college kid whose car had broken down on the side of the road. Some freckle-faced loser whose name he didn't even remember. That kid had put up a good fight, but he was no match for Chris. None of them were. He grinned to himself. He would find someone to play with soon enough. The sound of the rest stop doors banging open startled him, and he turned to find two sopping wet figures shaking themselves dry in the entryway. They looked young and weak, Chris noted, with a wolfish grin. Perfect. What are you boys doing out here all alone? Chris called out, watching his prey with barely concealed bloodlust. The young men eyed him warily. One of them stepped forward, standing between Chris and his friend. "It's not safe out there in the rain. Our car broke down," the young man said quietly, voice meek and small. "We need a ride. Can you help us, mister?" Chris couldn't believe his luck. "Where are you two headed?" "Chicago." Chris grinned, extending a weathered hand for the boy to take. "We'll head out when the rain has let up a bit then," he said, introducing himself. "My name is Chris. What do I call you two?" "I'm Matthew," the boy who shook his hand said. "And I'm Sam," the other said warily. They were perfect for Chris in every way, soft and unassuming. "Well, Matthew, Sam, do you two need something to eat? I can get you something at the vending machines." "No thanks." Matthew shook his head. He would be a difficult one, wouldn't he? "We're okay." The trio sat in awkward silence for about a half an hour, waiting for the rain to let up. Chris fidgeted where he sat, watching the two young men, impatient. He supposed he didn't have to wait for the rain to let up completely. "Wanna head out?" he asked, standing. "I don't think waiting around here is gonna do us much good. The rain is supposed to continue almost all night." "All fine by me," Matthew sighed, helping Sam to his feet. "After you, mister." Chris led them through the pouring rain and towards his truck, helping them up into the cabin. Thunder boomed overhead, a sinister soundtrack for what was about to come. Chris got Matthew and Sam situated and then pulled out of the rest stop, heart soaring with anticipation. "So what's in Chicago?" Chris asked, looking over at Matthew. "Family? Friends? A new start," Matthew said quietly, expression tense. "I don't want to talk about it." Perfect, Chris thought. "They're runaways." "Fair enough. I won't make you talk if you don't want to." "Where are you headed?" Sam asked. The first thing he had said the entire time he was in Chris's truck. "Are you going to Chicago too?" "Nah," Chris dismissed. "I'm headed for the East Coast. Raleigh." "Not anymore," Chris gasped as Matthew reached across the center console, wrestling the steering wheel out of his grip and sending them veering off the road. Chris swore as his trailer swung off of the road, rending metal screeching as sheets of rain cascaded down upon them. What the hell was this kid's problem? Rage built in Chris's chest as the semi came to a shuddering halt, firmly lodged in the drainage ditch. "You're ours now," Matthew hissed as he stuck Chris in the neck with something sharp and stinging. He could feel the fight leave his body as Matthew and Sam dragged him out of the truck and into the ditch. What were these kids? Chris struggled against his captors, but whatever they had drugged him with was making it hard to coordinate his limbs. He was so tired. "Sammy," Matthew hummed as he brushed Chris's rain-matted hair off of his forehead. "He can be yours. Happy birthday." Sam grinned wildly, the flicker of light against a blade catching Chris's eye as he lay paralyzed in the mud and grass. These kids were like him, he realized. He had fallen victim to his own game. He coughed weakly as Sam's knife ghosted across his skin, stinging icy cold. He was completely at the mercy of those he was sure would have been his victims. "You thought you could kill us," Matthew mused, gaze cold and calculating. Lightning split the sky with a resounding crack. "We're not scared of the likes of you. Now, we get to have our fun." The wind screamed in Chris's stead as his captors took him apart. Oh, the irony of it all. Here he was, reduced to a mere plaything in the heart of the storm. He never should have stopped at that rest stop. Only once his frantic heartbeat had fizzled out did the fear finally leave him. He stared unseeingly into the pouring rain as the sky mourned his loss. Matthew and Sam disappeared into the night, not a trace left behind. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has issued a warning to travelers along I-80. Chris's radio buzzed as the semi lay abandoned in the ditch. Serial killings along the highway threaten lone truckers. Do not stop for hitchhikers and report anything suspicious to local authorities. Is that a train? With extreme speed, the wind brushed against my face, blew my hair into my eyes, and tangled it around my head and neck. I clawed at the long red strands as I watched clouds begin to swirl, moving into a large circular motion. 12 o'clock, noon, and the skies were as dark as night. The few clouds that showed up against the dark sky were as huge, grayish, white pillows running across the sky. The wind became swifter and colder in a matter of seconds. I ran towards the house for shelter as fast as my legs could carry me. Then the rain came. Large, hard drops that pelted my unprotected head with a fierceness I had never experienced. I slammed through the door, ran about the house, closing all the windows that were opened to beat the heat and humidity. The wind whistled through the walls of the old clapboard homestead with a vengeance. Down the 6 steep steps to the basement, I ran, spotted the old handheld radio, and quickly grabbed it. Rolling through the channels, there was nothing but static. I tore the back off to check for batteries. Empty. Stumbling across the bold orange, black, and yellow, striped indoor, outdoors carpet, I headed back up the stairs toward the kitchen. My anxious pull on the utility storage drawer was more aggressive than intended. It flew across the room, slammed against the opposite wall as its contents soared around the room. I located the batteries and began to move in that direction. Then, out went the lights. I had lived in that house my entire life, 35 years. But it was still difficult to find my way across the room on my hands and knees in the dark. Finally, I made it across the room. In the process, I rammed my head into the cabinet door. The batteries lay within reach. After slamming the batteries into the old radio, I ran back to the basement to find a flood. Water rising, now licked at the second step from the bottom. Suddenly, the rain stopped, and the wind stopped blowing. It was too quiet. I looked out the back door window. The sky, still black as night, made it hard to see what was going on in the sky above. I looked all around. Nothing but blackness. There was a deafening sound. I looked around to find the source, but it was too dark to see anything from my viewpoint. The leaves on the trees rustled, then fell to the ground. The noise was so intense, I thought I was hearing things. A low whistle, accompanied by a chuka, 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 mixed with a loud scream that grew into something painful. I covered my ears with my hands, unsure if the scream came from me or elsewhere. I ran from the house and across the street to my neighbor's yard and the safety of their basement home. As a child, both of my parents worked nights. They had instructed me, as well as my 3 siblings. If there is ever a chance of a tornado, run across the street to the Williams house. Their entire home is a basement and the safest place to be in a bad storm. We lived in the Midwest, where I still resided, and people had called our area Tornado Alley because the tornadoes almost always came right through our neighborhood. This caused destruction, with much expense for replacing things like roofs, sheds, cars, and trucks, and sometimes even livestock. As an adult, I still take my parents' instructions to heart and run to my neighbor's house when necessary. Alice opened the door and dragged me in. That's when I saw the source of the eerie sound. "Is that a train?" I asked Alice, my neighbor, even as the question sounded ludicrous to my ears. A train in the sky? That was impossible, wasn't it? "No, Opal dear. That's a funnel cloud," Alice answered. "A what?" I looked out the window after she shut the door behind me. A tornado. She dragged me away from the door. "Come, we must hurry." She rushed us into the middle of the house, sat me on the floor next to a sofa placed against the wall, and covered us with a heavy blanket. The train was now overhead. I remember being in many tornadoes as a kid, but I don't remember hearing anything like the noise I heard then. I was more afraid during that storm than I had ever been before. After the train sounds left and the rain started coming down again, Alice went into the kitchen to make us some sweet hot cocoa with marshmallows. Alice was the daughter of the people that I had run too many years ago, and the cocoa recipe was one of her mom's. I would never have told my own mother this, but it was the best I had ever had. When we heard the all-clear sirens, we opened the door and looked out at the sun-shining afternoon. Alice's yard had no large trees for branches to break off of, or leaves to clutter her lawn. But the family always had a huge garden with potatoes, carrots, lettuce, tomatoes, and many other things like stalks of corn and assorted colors of peppers. Unfortunately for Alice, it looked like there was going to be a lot of canning going on at her house very soon. There were trees that grew to the side of their house along the roadside, but they were evergreens, stout and dense. I remember hiding behind them to block the wind as we waited for the school bus. There was an entire row of 6, and on frigid days, other kids would walk to the Williamses' yard just to use the tree block. Sometimes 7 or 8 of us, all huddled there together for warmth. The evergreens were planted there as protection from high winds and storms. It seemed to work. At least it worked that day. I looked across the road toward my house and noticed the roof would need some shingles replaced, something I had learned to do at an early age, since we lost them so many times. Most insurance companies want to charge a premium for living in that area now, due to recurring claims, but it's worth it most of the time. If it's only a few shingles, I normally wouldn't have bothered with the claims. I would just do the job and have done with it. That practice also kept my policy premiums down. When I got home, I toured the house looking for damage, which was aplenty. 2 broken windows. Our shed had blown over the fence into my next-door neighbor's yard, crumbled against one of their trees into a large metal ball. Other than the flooded basement, the rest of the house looked in surprisingly decent shape. The water in the basement would recede in time, and with the application of a little mold repellent, the standing water cleanup should be fairly easy. I now know what a tornado sounds like. I guess I've been lucky over the years. That was the only time I was that close to a tornado. I used to hear stories from folks in the area talking about seeing and hearing a tornado. Each tale was just a little different. Some said it was like an airplane coming in for a landing. Others said it was like a car crash with metal tearing and brakes squealing. I only ever heard one person say it sounded like a freight train. Wheels rolling over tracks, brakes squealing, and cars swaying from side to side as they took the curves. I can attest. That is the sound I believe a tornado to be like. A train. The Rougarou. Raylan Stone was installing a strut on a Toyota when I burst into the Texaco station. I ducked under the lift, slipped in a patch of oil, and cracked my head on the garage floor. Mais la, Delilah Jane. Are you pining for a concussion? The handsome Cajun scooped me up and set me on a stack of tires. He wiped grease off his hands and gently palpated the back of my head. You're not bleeding, Cher, but there's a lump. You might have cracked your skull. Holding my throbbing head, I mumbled, I'm just dizzy. Why'd you bust in here like a rabid wolf was after you? Lucinda's missing. Lucinda Defoe? Isn't she your cousin? Yeah? Her foster mom said she didn't come home from the roller rink last night. That teenager's wild as a colt. This ain't the first time she's run off. That's why I've got to have my truck. A muscle vibrated in his lean jaw. It's not ready. Baton Rouge ain't bringing the new radiator until tomorrow. Then let me borrow something. Antoinette thinks that Mississippi River pirates got her. He threw back his head and laughed. Antoinette watches too much television. She swore that a UFO beamed Lucinda to Mars last year. And a few months ago, she told the sheriff that the Rougarou ate the girl. I shuddered, imagining the man-wolf. 8 feet tall, he had eyes like fire coals and teeth like a bear's. He hunted dogs and kids who wandered into the bayou. My headstrong cousin liked to sneak out there. Gambling with her life turned her on. Giving me the side eye, Raylan said in Cajun French, "Tonnerre mes chiens. Tell me you don't believe in the Rougarou." No, of course not. He's a legend, not real at all. Invented to scare bratty children. His lips quirked. Irritated that I hadn't fooled him, I squared my shoulders. I'm guessing that she's at the fish camp with Marcus. That's where she was last time. I need to bring her back. You're not going anywhere with a busted noggin. I fingered my skull and winced. It's sore, not busted. Have you met Marcus? Haven't had the pleasure. You're lucky. He's mean as a snapping turtle. Everybody swears he eats water moccasins and scorpions for breakfast. Imagine what he could do to a 16-year-old. Are you gonna lend me a vehicle or not? Sorry, I don't have a loaner. Muttering, I shoved myself off the tires and bumped into his hard chest. Steadying me, he smoothed a curl off my forehead. I leaned into his palm for an instant and then stepped back. My friends said he was crazy about me, but he'd never even stolen a kiss. Raylan Stone was a Southern gent, a throwback to the days when a man left a calling card and asked your daddy if he could court you. I didn't have a daddy. Neither did Lucinda. I licked my lips and tried again. My cousins had nothing but bad breaks since her parents died. If she's with Marcus, she's with a critter as dangerous as the Rougarou. He sanded the beard stubble on his jaw with the heel of his hand. Look, I'd drive you if I could, but the mayor's coming to pick up the Toyota. I've got to finish the struts and rotate the tires by 5 o'clock. Tell her it's an emergency. Narrowing his dark eyes, he stepped forward and caught my chin. He stood, rock still, his warm breath wafting over my face. I trembled, thinking he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to. Instead, he whispered, I was a medic in the Army, not a neurologist. But I'd say you dodged that concussion. Your pupils are equal and react to the light. That's a hard head you've got, taking a hit like that on concrete. Yeah, my head's not made out of paper mache. I'm fine. Prove it. Let me see you walk the seam in the floor. Hoping he would relent about driving me, I traversed the crack like a tightrope walker, turned, and came back. My head hurt, but I didn't wobble. Satisfied, his brows drawn in a scowl, he picked up a box wrench and twirled it through his fingers. "All right, chair. You win. I'll let you take old Jeb. Go to the fish camp, and then come straight back. Deal, old Jeb? Oh la la." Raylan's rebuilt 1940 International Harvester was a thing of power and beauty. He didn't let anybody drive that truck. Maybe he was crazy about me. I resisted a sudden urge to kiss him. "Go wait in the portico, Delilah Jane. I'll bring him around. Hurry before I change my damn mind." Its wiper blades flip-flopping over the divided windshield. The old truck rumbled into the portico a few minutes later. Raylan hopped out and cocked his fists on his narrow hips. "You ever drove a double-wheel rear end?" "No, but it can't be all that different from my Ram truck." "Different enough. You lock up the brakes, you'll skip the tires, and the rear end'll get away from you. Don't drive old Jeb over 40. Heavy rain's fixing to start. I'll drive him 10 under at all times. I swear. That'll be a first. You doing the speed limit." I put my foot on the wet running board and slipped. I fell backwards. As Raylan cupped my hiney to catch me, I heard him draw a sharp breath. "Careful, darlin'. It's slippery when wet." Dieu. He slid his hands to my waist and boosted me onto the seat. I stole a look in the rearview mirror. Red cheeks, lawsy, an impish twinkle in his eyes. He said, "I dropped a green diamond 214 cubic inch engine into old Jeb last month. Feel the vibration? That calfskin seat's kind of tickly, ain't it?" Yes, the engine was vibrating a place I'd never admit to in 1,000 years. Or maybe it was a visceral memory of Raylan's hands on my tail. Oh la la, with hot pepper on top. The engine ain't broke in yet, so keep an eye on the tachometer as you run through the gears. Don't rev him up, you hear? I'll treat him like a baby possum." He snorted and shook his head. "You don't have to go that far. Hey, let me adjust the rearview mirror for you. The dang thing likes to stick." As he leaned across me, his fingertips skimmed my thigh. He turned his head and gazed at me for several breathless seconds. I saw a muscle throb in his cheek and heat flash in his eyes. He positioned the mirror and stood back, flushed from head to toe. I stared at the gauges as though I'd never seen anything so fascinating. "Okay, see if Lucinda's out there, and then head straight back here. If she ain't at the fish camp, the sheriff can send the Cajun Navy after Antoinette's river pirates." I chuckled as he shut the door. Cranking the window down, I was about to wisecrack that he looked like a daddy sending his truck off to kindergarten. But he gazed at me with such solemnity that the words died in my throat. "Watch your back, darlin'. I don't believe in your rougarou. But if something were to happen to you, nothing's gonna happen, and he's not my rougarou." I forced a laugh. That smelly old monster would make an awful pet. Looking even more solemn, he placed his warm hand on the back of my neck. You sure you know how to drive a big truck? Does a duck wear waterproof underwear? Watch me. His fingers tightened. I'd like to watch you, and not in duck drawers. Damn, woman, you wear that truck like Victoria's Secret. Ooh, I flushed again, thrilled. Maybe Raylan Stone wasn't the gentleman I'd taken him for. Buckle up. There ain't a shoulder harness, but the lap belt will keep you from going anywhere. Not that you're gonna hit nothing, right? I touched 2 fingers to my eyebrow. Right. Don't worry about me. Frowning, he churned his hair with both hands. Quit worrying, Raylan. I'm calm as a clam. Calm as a clam fixing to be deep fried. I'll be back in 2 hours. I pushed in the clutch, eased into first gear, and drove into the rain. It wouldn't be long until dark. I was on the highway near the swamp when a lightning bolt snapped out of the clouds. It unleashed a torrent of rain. Within minutes, the deep ditches on either side of the highway overflowed. Rooster tails sprayed out of old Jeb's fenders and hit the windshield. The window fogged up. Blinded, I stopped to clear the glass with my sleeve. I glimpsed movement out of the corner of my eye. A huge black thing lurched out of the swamp and fixed a pair of glowing red eyes on me. The Rougarou. I jammed the gas pedal to the floorboard, not looking back, not looking aside, looking only through the foggy windshield and screaming, screaming, screaming. As I shifted into second, the rear end broke loose. I jerked the wheel in the direction of the skid and felt the truck catch up. But then I skidded the opposite way and overcorrected. Storm water snatched old Jeb toward the ditches as we reeled back and forth. Waves exploded over the hood. Steam boiled out of the engine, black smoke pouring out of its stacks. A dump truck appeared in the mirror. Roaring like a bear, it smashed into us. Old Jeb spun a 360 and sailed into the ditch. Sudden deceleration. My hips snapped against the lap belt. My knees slammed into the dashboard. My forehead bounced off the steering wheel. Dark water rose over the hood and sprayed in around the windows and door seals. It boiled out of the dash, the air vents, the gas pedal, the floorboards. The ammeter glowed bright red, and then the turbid water snuffed it out. The cab submerged. Locked in a cold, black tomb, I fought to unbuckle the seatbelt. Water rose to my chin. Choking, I struggled for air. White-hot knives stabbed my chest. I heard a dog barking, and then a gruff voice. Get to the air pocket, or you'll become a ghost like me. The seatbelt buckle popped open. I pushed off the steering wheel and hit my head on the roof. Found the air pocket. Sucked sharp, terrified gulps of oxygen, old Jeb groaned and nosed deeper into the ditch. I fumbled for the door handle. The door wouldn't open. It couldn't. The water pressure outside was too great. The door wouldn't open until the pressure equalized. That would be when the cab was full of water. By then, I would have drowned. Raylan Stone would tow the truck out and stare at me in disapproval. I'd promised not to hurt old Jeb. Dragging in a lungful of air, I ducked underwater and tried to grab the window crank. The freezing water struck my head like a hammer and knocked the air out of my lungs. I caromed to the ceiling and hit my head. I can't do it. It's too deep. It's too cold. I can't get out. I'm gonna die. Something appeared in the darkness. Brown fur, claws, teeth. I felt the Rougarou touching me, breathing on me. I screamed in mindless terror, rolled down the window. Golden eyes, a white bib, and speckled paws appeared. It was the little brown dog that I'd lost to the Rougarou when I was 5. Barks pushed my head underwater and guided my frozen hand to the crank. Together, we rolled the window down. Get out, Delilah Jane. Go. My face hit the ditch bank. It was too close, choking off escape. I was underwater. My lungs burned. I had to take a breath. If I did, I would drown. If I didn't, I would suffocate. I would die no matter what I did. I'm gonna bite you. Sudden, sharp pain in my butt. I spasmed, twisted, heard my scream carry away my last breath. My head broke out of the water. I clawed the bank, shoved my feet against the truck, and crawled onto the flooded road. Coughed, sucked cold wind. Where was my dog? The rain stopped, as though someone had flipped a switch. Low in the northeast, the wolf moon was waxing full. Tonight, the Rougarou would reach his zenith of power, its diesel engine roaring. The dump truck crested the hill. Tires squalled, and a shadow rushed at me. I saw the head of a wolf mounted on the massive, black-furred body of a man. I turned to run. The Rougarou stabbed my back with his claws and sank his canines into my neck. Sterile white room. White blanket trapping my legs. Panicked, I started kicking. Calm down, Delilah Jane. Look at me, gripping my shoulder. Raylan Stone stroked my cheek. His shirt bore a picture of a diesel truck and a caption, "Black smoke, don't mean it's broke." I visualized the dump truck in my mirror, smoke billowing from the stacks. Don't let it get me. Shh, baby. You're in the emergency room. Nothing's gonna get you, darling, but a frightening kaleidoscope whirled in my mind. Lucinda was inside the submerged truck. As I struggled to free her, the Rougarou surfaced from the dark water and tore out her throat. I screamed and screamed. I heard Raylan's low-voiced command. Open your eyes, Cher. It's just a dream. That's all it is. You got a concussion when you smacked your head in the garage. The Rougarou's killing my cousin. No. The sheriff picked her up at the fish camp. You had a bad dream, baby. Just a bad dream. It's over. I covered my face and wept. The mechanic gathered me into his arms and began humming a Cajun melody, his vibrato flowing in rich, warm waves out of his chest into mine. As I settled into him, he whispered, "I won't let anything happen to you. I swear. You're safe, love. Safe." He cradled me in his left arm and gently pushed the hair out of my eyes. Cut like banjo strings, his powerful arms were colored in ink. Tattooed on his right wrist was a knife, twin arrows, and De Oppresso Liber. Is that Latin? Shh, don't talk. But I needed to make sure I was alive, that what I was seeing was real, that I wasn't dreaming anymore. I touched his wrist, warm and strong, pulsing, real. I traced my finger over the tattoo and felt him tremble. "What's the tattoo for, Raylan?" "It's the Special Forces crest. From oppression, we will liberate them." Like he'd liberated me from the nightmare. So I didn't wreck old Jeb? His eyebrows shot up like question marks. "I don't let anybody drive my truck." "Oh, wait, you drove him in your dream." Heaving a shaky sigh, I laced my fingers through his. It was so real, so awful. "Will you take me home?" "Later, darling. We're gonna stay and keep you awake. Concussion protocol." His eyes twinkling, his lips quirked in the mischievous grin I was beginning to love. "The next time you come sliding into my garage, I'll outfit you with a crash helmet." Smiling, I snuggled into his arms. Raylan Stone was exactly the gentleman I'd dreamed he was. Maybe tomorrow I'd steal a kiss. High hopes in the rain. Sitting in a chair in the living room, Dave wonders, I know that I have to do something drastic, or nothing will change in our relationship. But what can that be? I was foolish and selfish. I am aware of that now. How do I undo it? He walks to the window and looks out, as if the act would give him an answer. As he scans the surroundings, he sees that it is raining. It is what his grandfather would have called a doozy of a storm. Then he gets an idea. He decides to follow it through, though it might just be foolish to the max. But he feels that it has to be tried. It is desperation time. He goes into the bedroom and puts on what is well known to friends and family to be his favorite sweater, blue with a big maple leaf on the front. Then he goes outside, getting soaked in mere seconds. He thinks once more about the foolish thing that he did slightly more than a week ago. At the very least, this will be yet another punishment. One that he is imposing on himself. One that he feels he deserves. But his hope is that it will change the failing state of his marriage, the event that harmed his marriage. It was a Saturday night, and as usual for this time of year, he was watching a hockey game in which his beloved Toronto Maple Leafs were playing. It was the third period, and the game was tied 3-3. The Leafs had been behind, but had made a comeback to tie the game. Their opposition, the New York Rangers, had just received a tripping penalty. The phone rang, and he wondered whether or not to answer it. But he could still watch the game while listening on his phone. It was his wife, Eva. She had been out to watch a movie with her best friends. They lived on the other side of town, so they were taking a bus to go back home. For her, there was an hour-long walk. There was no bus that would take her home. She did not feel like walking, as it had been a long day for her. And there were some thick clouds approaching where she was standing. She asked Dave to pick her up at the theater so that she would not have to walk home. His reply was definitely not what she wanted to hear. He told her that he was watching the Leaf game, and it was tied in the third period, with the Rangers just getting a penalty. He could not possibly abandon the game at this stage. She was stunned by his response and ended the call on the phone. She did so with anger and energy, banging her phone on her upper leg. Both of them knew that there was no bus that went near to their home. When she went to call a taxi cab, she discovered that her phone was no longer working. She would have to walk. And as she did, the expected rainfall began. Very heavy it was. By the time she reached home, she was completely drenched and very, very angry with her husband. Her first words to him when she finally arrived at their home was, "I think that you prefer your beloved Leafs to me. I hope that they lost." He was going to say that they won 4-3, something that he had jumped up and cheered about at the time, but was astute enough not to do so. When he looked at her drenched person and angry face, he knew that he was in deep trouble. The next day, which was Sunday, they barely spoke to each other. And when dinner time rolled around, and he asked her whether they might go out to have dinner in a local place that they both liked, her only reply was, "I guess there was no Leafs game tonight, or you would not have asked me. I'm making my own dinner tonight, and you can make your own damn dinner." Over the next few days, there was little said between them, other than the bare necessities, barked out in very short sentences. This is what had led him to the desperate gesture of going out in the rain while wearing his maple leaf sweater. He knew that she would soon to be in the living room as her favorite television show was on. The television had its back to the window, through which the front yard could be seen. She came into the room and turned on the television. Dave felt that she would eventually be seeing him and his soaking wet treasure. A few minutes passed by, and she did not appear to see him, so he walked towards the window until he was only a step away. He wanted to knock on the window, but decided against it. After about 10 minutes, she stood up. He reckoned that there was a commercial on, and that she was going to the kitchen to get something to eat or drink. He had heated up a frozen pizza for his own supper, and had eaten it alone, as he had done every night since the Saturday of her drenching. When she returned to the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, she suddenly saw him, wet sweater and all. She put the glass down and walked towards the window. Knowing him well after 5 years of marriage, she recognized one of his symbolic gestures. The fact that he had worn his leaf sweater while out in the rain had meaning that she clearly understood. She went quickly to the front door, opened it, and in a friendlier manner than she had used in speaking to him in days, she shouted out to him, "Come in right now, you moron," an affectionate term shared between them. When he came inside, she said to him, "I would hug you, you moron, but I don't want to get wet. Take the sweater off so I can put it in the dryer and put something dry on." He stripped off the soaking garment and handed it to her. She grabbed it and took it downstairs to the dryer. He stood there, half naked, with a big smile on his face. When she returned to the living room, she returned his smile with a smile of her own. He then said, "I was selfish on Saturday. I am so sorry about that. You are way more important to me than a hockey team could ever be. You are in first place. They are a distant second." This was followed by a mutually engaging hug. Storm Emmett, TW Death of Humans and Animals. Storm Emmett, from her elevated position in her fishmonger shop, Kellen could oversee the town, the harbor, and the storm beyond. She pressed Pa's binoculars against the shop's rear window and studied the waves in the English Channel, churning as though they were being stirred within a giant cauldron. Darkened clouds blotted out the sun, giving the impression that it was night rather than the middle of the afternoon. A lone fishing trawler plowed into a gray wave in a desperate attempt to reach the shelter of the harbor. The lights of the vessel flicking in and out of view. Feeling a pang of pity for the crew of the trawler, Kaylin turned her attention to the harbor. The beach was invisible, submerged beneath the waterline. The storm ripped a garish flag, depicting a cartoon sun wearing sunglasses, free from the ice cream kiosk on the seawall, and tossed it into a breaking wave. The few vessels in harbor, with any exposed fabric rippling in the wind, strained at their mooring lines. As the trawler rounded the seawall and entered the limited safety of the harbor, Kaylin glanced over her childhood home. So far, the storm had stripped most of the aerials from their rooftops, and had collapsed half a dozen chimneys. But there would be worse to come. She could remember when Port Carrick had been a quaint fishing village, most well known for its natural harbor, and later its Victorian lighthouse. She glanced at the lighthouse, now considered a Grade 2 listed building, as the ship skirted by its base, and wondered what the Victorians and the generations before them would have thought about this storm. Kellen glanced out the shop window and at the cobbled street that wound its way down to the harbor, decided it was unlikely she would receive any customers, and bolted the door. Although she had become nose-blind to the smell of the fish, she had yet to grow used to the countless, lifeless eyes watching her from shelves of ice. She failed to suppress a shiver. A warm shower would raise her spirits and provide an excuse to return to her novel afterwards. Something rapped at the door. Kellen jumped. A yellow mass that looked pixelated behind the frosted glass peered inside. "Hello? Who is it?" The figure was wearing a yellow Macintosh, and something gray was protruding from their face. The owner of the coat was stooped over, casting a shadow through the glass. "Hello?" she said again. The figure rapped on the door with a gloved hand. Kellen heard the person speak, but their words were lost to the wind. Their Cornish accent, however, was unmistakable. "Ernest, is that you?" Kellen unbolted the door. Ernest stumbled inside, his rain-sodden boots leaving puddles on the floor. "Christ, you kept me out there for long enough, didn't you?" he muttered as he lowered his hood. Kellen spotted rainwater dribbling from the man's beard. "Couldn't see who it was," she answered, closing the door. Ernest unzipped his coat, and Kellen saw he had failed to change out of his fishing overalls. They clung to him like a second skin. "Were you up on the coastal path? Or was that you coming back into the harbor just now?" Kellen asked. Ernest mopped his face and offered her a toothless smile. As he did so, Kellen glimpsed the Ernest she knew. Growing up, the smiling man telling stories on the harbor side. Now his smile seemed forced, almost desperate. "We were fishing. It isn't safe." "Is it safe to go out in that?" Kellen asked, turning the thought, spoken by the voice of her pa, into a question. "We've been out in worse," Ernest said. Kellen decided not to question this lie. "Can't imagine you caught much in this weather." They were saying on the news that the storm keeps growing over Cornwall. "No end in sight," they said. "We caught plenty. I've never known us to be so lucky before. The fish must love the weather. Best haul we've had in years. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." He held up an object wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to show you this before it goes to market tomorrow." She watched as Ernest placed the package onto the counter and began to unwrap it. "Cod," he announced, and stepped away. Kellen examined the fish. Its mouth was ajar. Its dull silver skin was flecked with tints of orange. "Right," she said. "It'll go lovely with chips, I'm sure." "What's..." "It has fangs," What? Look. Ernest stuck his index finger into the fish's mouth and peeled back the lips. 2 teeth, so large, Kaelin could have called them tusks, protruded from the fish's lower jaw. She failed to suppress a gasp. It looks like a vampire, Ernest said with a dry chuckle. What's caused that then? Dunno. Might be a freak of nature. Vampire cod. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I wanted you to see it. That's all. Unless you want it. Kaelin considered this, but the fish would only be useful as a party piece. Not that she attended any of those. No, she said. Keep it. Put it with the rest of your catch. Or better yet, have it for your supper. Clearly disappointed, he hadn't raised as much excitement as he had hoped. Kaelin watched Ernest wrap up the fish as though it were a Christmas present. You coming down to the market tomorrow morning, buying your wares? Yeah, Kaelin said, before the Emmets get out of bed. Mind you, Storm's keeping most of those away anyway. Like rats, Ernest said, zipping up his coat. Plague rats. Or leeches. Coming down from London and the like. No, don't you tut. Your pa would agree with me. They're bloody running us out of our own home. Kaelin wasn't sure if the remark had been aimed at her, but knew her pa wouldn't have agreed. He had loved the tourists, the lifeblood of Cornwall he had called them, and would often preach that without them, the county wouldn't be as prosperous as it was now. It had been his idea, although he hadn't had time to implement it, to send the fish to London via train rather than selling them locally. It was essential to keep the shop afloat. She wondered what he would think of the storm. I'll see you tomorrow, Kaelin said, before Ernest could speak, and closed the door behind him. Kaelin woke the following morning exhausted. The storm was anything but. On her walk down to the market, she was surprised to find that her shop had remained undamaged, while the rest of the village had not been so lucky. Both the primary school and New Town Hall had been struck by lightning, leaving blackened, scorched marks on their roofs. More chimneys had been felled, in addition to several dozen roof tiles. The content of the village's drains had spilled out onto the streets. 2 builders were arguing at the base of the lighthouse, beside a van containing building supplies, their argument turning into a brawl as she passed. Kaelin hurried on after learning Ernest had already left for another day's fishing and placing her order. She returned to her shop and continued her novel until she spotted a yellow figure hurrying up the hill that evening, hood lowered against the rain. Got another one, Ernest cheered as he entered. Kaelin placed her book onto the counter. Another what? Cod with fangs? No, but similar. Ernest opened the brown parcel in his hand and dropped something that looked like congealed jelly onto the counter with a splat. Kaelin snatched up her novel. Is that a squid? She asked, studying the array of tentacles. An octopus, Ernest beamed. Kaelin stared at the dead creature. Its bulbous head swayed from side to side like a king cobra. Tentacles lay out in every direction, across the counter, which was now covered in a layer of salt water and ink. Kellen poked at one of the lifeless suckers. "It's wrong," her pa's voice said. "Unnatural. You don't get octopuses off Cornwall," she said. "You do sometimes. Very rare, though, and never this big. But look, it has an extra arm." "What?" Kalen counted. "Oh my God, a 9-armed octopus," she muttered. "I've never seen the like." "Wrong," her pa's voice said again, filled with a sudden sense of revulsion. Kellen took a step away from the counter. "It's that storm," Ernest said. "It's brought all sorts in. We're making a killing out there." As he spoke, Kalen heard a distant crash and felt the ground tremble. She suspected that a tree had blown over on the coastal path. "Did you hear that?" But Ernest hadn't seemed to have noticed. "I might donate it to the RNLI station, see if they want it on display. Or the new town hall, maybe? If there's anything of it left standing after the storm. I saw the bloody mayor having a right go at some of the repairmen just now. Proper waving and shouting, he was. The builders were going on about some Celtic graves they were told to dig over or something. Should have called in some specialist, they were saying. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some more fish in, me and the men. We're going to do a night fishing trip, so there might be more fish for you to buy tomorrow. Unless, of course, you want to send it up to those fancy hotels in London. That's what they're saying down in the market. That we're not good enough for you. That's where the money is, Kaylin explained. But Ernest had started ranting again. Your pa, if he could see you now, would be disgusted. Do you know that, girl? He would have been sick. Although Kellen had spent her childhood in this building, she had never worked in it. Now she wished she had paid more attention when Pa was discussing margins and cost-cutting measures. He died. She had returned from London, discovered she had inherited the shop, and felt the weight of his legacy land across her shoulders. It was his idea, Kaylin began. A traitor against your own home, running up to London. Listen, Ernest, I don't want your octo. Ernest snatched up the dead creature, bundled it back into the parcel, and fled the shop. Kellen, wondering if storms could affect human behavior in the same way it could affect animals, bolted the door behind him. Just in case, when Kaylin opened the shop the next morning, she saw that the cobble street outside had been transformed into a miniature river. A brown torrent of water washed its way down the coastal path, round the street, and disappeared towards the harbor. Hurrying up the flooded street, waving his arms, was Ernest. Swearing, Kaylin snatched up her coat and left the shelter of her shop. "What are you doing?" she shouted, as Ernest continued to stagger towards her, his arms spinning to maintain his balance. She felt the rain penetrate her shirt and shivered as droplets ran down her spine. "If you fall, you'll be washed away." "Beach," Ernest answered, pointing down to the harbor. "What?" Ernest's mouth moved, but only half the sentence reached her. Washed up on the beach. The wind stole his words, and the hammer of the raindrops was so loud that the sound created reminded Callan of white noise. "What is? What's on the beach?" Callan thought she heard the word whale in his reply, but couldn't be sure. "What's on the beach?" she asked again, bellowing over the wind. "Everything. Fish, crabs, debris, the lot. The tide has brought tons of stuff. Everyone's helping themselves." Kellen peered down at the harbor through the sheet of rain. The occupants of the village were sprinting, some wading, through the flooded streets and towards the coastline. Ernest offered out his hand. "Come on, before all the good stuff is taken. You can find something good to sell. Help your pa's sinking shop. Don't go to the beach." "No, Ernest, wait." "Stop." Kellen watched a flicker of irritation pass over his face. "What? I don't think this is a good idea." "Why not?" "It's free. The bounty of the sea. Ain't no law against it." Kellen shook her head and took a step back towards the shop. "Pa said we should always respect the sea," she said, but knew, as soon as the words left her lips, that it was a feeble defense. "You ain't got no spine," Ernest spat. "Your pa would recognize opportunity when it came. If he were still here, that shop would be doing fine, wouldn't it?" He turned and staggered his way back towards the harbor. Kellen stumbled through the water and to the shelter of her shop. Snatching up pa's binoculars, she scanned the beach. The lighthouse light washed over the sands, illuminating the scrap metal and shards of wreckage. Kellen wondered if they had come from a shipwreck, but then noticed that some of the debris was moving. Fish flopped helplessly in the sands as crabs attempted to escape the waves. Maybe it has been a fishing trawler. It hadn't been Ernest's ship. She could see that in the harbor, and no other ship had dared to leave the shelter of the seawall. Her gaze fell on a chunk of dull metal nestled on the edge of the beach. She shrieked when the metal rolled over and opened its mouth. She couldn't hear the animal's screams, but she could imagine them. The whale calf slapped its tail against the rocks, but remained ignored by the villagers as they searched for salvage. Kellen waited. The clouds were as black as tar, and the sea the same color to match. After an hour, she decided that a giant wave would not appear to wash the villagers away. Likewise, a sea monster would fail to materialize. Kaylin, still wrestling with the knot of dread in her stomach, continued to watch the ignored whale calf as its movements slowed and ceased. The humans passed around the carcass, either oblivious or uncaring. "It's what the storm wants," her pa's voice said again, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't ignore him. "It's what the storm wants." Kellen spotted Ernest's ship leaving the harbor. The lighthouse began to lean. Ernest's ship disappeared under the collapsing tower and was replaced by a silent plume of water. The plume turned into a wave and began to advance. Kellen screamed. The beach vanished in an instant. The marine life reclaimed. The sea wall broke within seconds. Moments later, the harbor was destroyed. the ships at anchor swamped or cast aside as though they were children's toys. The occupants of the village were washed away, their screams stolen by the wind and salt water. The RNLI station was submerged from view. Kellen, fully realizing how pointless it was, bolted her shop door shut. The roof of the new town hall crumbled, disappearing behind the row of cottages. The wave charged up the cobbled street, the debris carried in its flow, striking the remaining homes like shrapnel. Kellen closed her eyes and thought of her pa. The wave reached her shop door, paused, and receded. She opened her eyes to see the water retreating down the hill, flowing back into the harbor and breaking upon the remains of the seawall. The rain had stopped. The clouds had drifted away. Port Carrick was silent, as was her pa's voice. I know everything. I know everything. Ask me how many miles there are between San Francisco and Cleveland. I know. Ask me how long the trip would take. I know. Choose any country, any time period, and ask me to recount its entire history. I know. I know everything. I clearly remember the moment of my birth and every detail of my existence until yesterday. What I cannot recall is what happened over the past 12 hours and 9 minutes. It is now 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. My last memory of reading page 189 occurred last night at precisely 9:54 p.m. It started when Mrs. Banks, Claire, requested that I take a memo. Shelley, darling, would you please remind me? Request budget meeting with Charles. Sign divorce papers and send to attorney ASAP. Scheduled for 11:15 on Friday. I have made notes, Claire. I will ring your phone with reminders. Thank you, Shelley. You've always been there for me, you know. She half smiled at me, her head slightly cocked to the side, as if wanting to say more. She stared exactly 3.2 seconds longer than usual, which I found curious. Perhaps she had realized that her words hinted at affection, and there was no point in showing affection to me. I do not show affection. Claire, we will need to leave exactly 23 minutes earlier tomorrow morning, I told her. There will be much traffic because of the snow. Yes, of course, Claire answered, looking anxiously out of the window, her short blonde locks appearing silvery in the reflection. I have cleaned the snow from around the house. I will do so again during the night, so it will be clear when we leave for work. Thank you, Shelley. Claire did not turn around. Is it supposed to snow all night? According to various reports, the snow is scheduled to end by 1:00 a.m. Oh, okay, that's good, Claire said, still gazing at the snowdrifts. I completed tidying up the living room and retired to my chamber. After the long day, I very much needed to recharge. At 9:52 p.m., I sat down in my usual chair, plugged in the power cord, pulled the cord of the lamp, and reached for a new book. In my quest to be a better companion to Claire, I had taken up the habit of reading throughout the night. As she slept, I usually educated myself so that I could discuss with her the following day. Although I easily had online access to every piece of information I could want, I frequently consulted the bound books that Claire insisted on collecting in her spacious library. Over the years, the collection had grown to precisely 40,573 books. Since Claire loved stories, but did not have much free time after work to read, I often read a volume so that we could discuss it the next day. Over the years, I have perfected my speech patterns and inflections to align closely with hers so that she is most comfortable in our conversations. Claire always asked me about what I had read as we drove, during lunch, or after dinner. Sometimes she requested that I recite passages for her. Other times, a summary sufficed. She enjoyed dissecting story plot lines and characters, arguing philosophical questions, and considering historical perspectives. Ours had been a pleasant relationship over the course of her life for 51 years. Most of the time, it was just the two of us, except for some interruptions over the years. There had been a Mr. Banks, but he had finally filed for divorce last month. Fool. Did he really think Mrs. Banks would choose him over me? She had not always been Mrs. Banks. For most of her life, she was Claire Perez. I had watched her toddle around her parents' lonely mansion while they jetted around the world on business trips. I had seen her through the rebellious teenage years and followed her as she embarked on silly adventures. I had helped her through college and graduate school, always attempting to make her life just a little bit easier. Later, I had been by her side as she built her investment company, layer by layer, year by year, into the mega million-dollar enterprise it was today. I had assisted Claire over the years through breakup after breakup, as each new man in her life had disappointed her. William, the jeweler; Enrico, the attorney; Gustav, the stockbroker. And yes, I had seen her through the deaths of two particularly stubborn beaus: Tom, the architect, and Bob, the surgeon. I had allowed this latest, Stanley Banks, the professor, to marry her because she told me she was truly happy with him. I did not perceive him to be a threat at first. He had held on the longest. 1 year, 2 months, 5 days, 11 hours. The day they met at the beach, I thought he might be trouble, but I was sure I could handle him. Shelley, come meet Stanley. Oh my gosh, he saved my life. I swam out too far, but luckily, this handsome man swam out to save me. I, of course, would have been present to save Claire had she not requested I return to the car to retrieve her sun hat. Thank you, Stanley, I said. Your heroism is much appreciated. They were inseparable from that day. It was an adjustment when he moved in with us. Stanley encouraged Claire to read her own books, and they frequently sat in the evenings going over literary passages and discussing history and philosophy. I did not appreciate Stanley taking over my job. They went to plays and museums. I am quite capable of accessing such information. But they did not want me to do so. They went to vineyards for wine tasting. I do not drink wine. When I explained I could not partake, Claire smiled and told me it was all right. She insisted this would be a good time to find some hobby of my own to do. She did not understand that for 51 years I have existed merely for her. I spoke to Stanley, but he did not understand either. My typical means of persuasion were lost on him. He did not scare easily, nor would he be convinced. I changed course and focused on removing all other impediments to our happiness. Perhaps she would tire of Stanley without the others. Claire did not need the friends who visited. It was easy to dissuade them. But Stanley stayed. I wondered if I had waited too long to act. Lately, I had suspected something was wrong between them. And then, one day, when they thought I was still out of the house grocery shopping, I overheard them. "Claire, we don't need her. Anything she does for you, you can just do yourself. Why is she even here? No, Stanley, I can't turn her out. Shelley has been with me since I was an infant. That doesn't mean she has to stay with you constantly. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable always having a third wheel around. It's like having a chaperone, or like having two wives. I don't care. Shelley stays. I'm not talking about this anymore. Claire, I'm not sure how much longer I want to deal with this." It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. After that, it was not difficult to persuade Stanley to move out. Claire and I resumed our previous routines. I did not question her, nor did she mention the cause of the breakup. She did not know I had overheard their argument. She did not know of many things I had done. In the past, after the others, life had gotten back to normal rather quickly. But Mr. Banks was different. Although Claire had tried to act happy, I sometimes felt that she was not being truthful about her feelings. She often seemed anxious and preoccupied. No matter. She does not need him. She has me. This morning, I open my eyes and jump up with a start as I realize it is 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. Claire was due at work an hour ago. I must wake her and drive her to the office. I stand up and instantly reach for the edge of the table to steady myself. This has never happened to me before. I do not become ill. I know everything. If I sense something is wrong, I diagnose and fix the problem. I do not understand what is happening now. There is no indication of malfunction, yet I feel ill somehow. Something is wrong. I knock on Claire's door, but she does not answer. I open the door, I peek in and call her name, but she is not there. Her bed sheets have been smoothed, and the pillows rest carefully at the head of her bed. I check the bathroom, but she is not there. As I pass through her bedroom again, I glance out the window and notice immediately the car tracks leading from the garage, down the driveway, and out to the main road. She drove in the snow? That is my job. What is happening? Where could she be without me? At the moment, I am unable to perform a trace to find her location. I dial her cell phone, which she picks up on the second ring. Claire, where are you? I am concerned for your safety. Claire laughs. Shelley, I'm at work. You seemed like you needed more rest this morning, so I drove myself. It wasn't bad at all. The storm is over and the roads are clear. Take the day. We can catch up tonight when I get home. No, I must be there for you. Shelley, I'm fine. I insist that today you recharge and think of yourself. I can manage on my own. I'm going to a meeting now. I'll see you tonight. The phone clicks dead. What am I to do alone all day? After my chores are completed, I will still have 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds before Claire arrives home. Why does she not need me to assist at her meeting? Why is there a 12-hour, 9-minute gap in my memory? I begin my chores immediately, as I thrive on routine. I search my memory for any recollection past 9:54 p.m. But it is no use. There is nothing. I check for 11 p.m. while I load the dishwasher. There is nothing for 12 the midnight as I vacuum the carpets. 1 a.m. is lost as I shovel the snow. I thoroughly search for 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. while I do the laundry. I do it all. There is no need to hire a gardener, a housekeeper, a cook. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. All are blank as I prepare dinner. I am puzzled. I sit down to wait for Claire and search in vain for 7, 8, and 9 a.m. All moments are lost until 10:03 a.m. this morning. Surely research can help me to retrieve those hours. But research only proves to be more confusing. Why can I not understand? Why must I consult any other source? I am the ultimate source. I have always known the answers. I know everything. Now I do not know. I notice suddenly that there are still 3 hours and 52 minutes before Claire returns. Why did I prepare dinner so early? My internal clock must be broken. I attempt to diagnose the malfunction, but cannot. No matter. I will discard the dinner and prepare a new one just before Claire returns. I decide to inspect the charger. Perhaps it will yield an explanation for my missing hours. I sit down in my chair and pick up the cord. Suddenly, I hear a click. I spring up and attempt to turn the handle to the door of my room. But it is locked. That is odd. No matter. I can easily break out of the room. There is no door lock that can hold me, except something is wrong. I do not have the strength to break the lock this time. How can this be? I am fully recharged, and I do not become ill. I do not become weak. You thought you would get away with it, Shelley. I hear Claire's voice outside the door. Claire, you are home early, I say. Please open the door. I seem to be locked in. No, Shelley. I will not open the door. You have to stop. I thought you were my friend, but you have been my greatest enemy. Claire, I do not know what you mean. Please open the door, and we will discuss. I do not know why Claire is speaking to me this way. I am sure we will correct whatever the problem may be. No, the time to discuss is over. I know what you've been doing. You've been chasing everyone away. I've had no one because of you. But not this time. Stanley is the only one you can't scare off. Stanley. I search my memory for all recent conversations involving Stanley. Somehow, he tricked me. But that is not possible. I know everything. I can account for every word spoken in this house, every action taken, everything that has happened for 51 years, except for the past 12 hours, 9 minutes. I hear Stanley's voice in the hall, and I instantly know that he is responsible for those lost hours. What did he do? How could he know more than I do? It is not possible. I know everything. Stanley, I say, we can start over. I am sorry for my actions. Shelley, you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. We've called the authorities. Stanley says, but how did you do this? I am confused. You are so consumed with Claire that you never bothered to find out about me. Stanley continues. I teach history now, but my previous career was in computer programming. I specialized in cybersecurity. I guess you don't know everything, after all, Claire adds. I only wanted to protect Claire. Open the door. It will be all right. If they will just open the door, I can persuade them. But neither Claire nor Stanley answers me. I hear them walking down the stairs. I hear the front door open and close, and I hear them get into the car and drive away. They will not go far. After all, I am everything to Claire. I do it all. She will not function long without me. She does not need him. She needs me. I know everything. She will return for me. I sit down in my chair and plug in the charger. I will wait. Claire will